In the small part of the town of Arata, where the street echoes with the sounds of laughter and distant drum, there lived a young girl named Sandra. Sandra lived with her mother Nkechi in a small bungalow. Sandra was the only child of her parents. Her father passed away when she was just a little girl. Nkechi, being a hard-working woman, worked tirelessly as a seamstress, dedicated her life to ensuring Sandra had everything she needed. Sandra was not from a wealthy home, but she lived a life of no lack. She attended one of the best schools in town. Her mother, Nkechi, was determined to give Sandra the best life has to offer, being the only child of the family. Nkechi channeled all her love, hope, and attention on Sandra, ensuring she has a bright future. She often told Sandra stories of her father, a man of wisdom and kindness, with the hope that the stories of her father will instill in her the values he had so much cherished. Nkechi knew the world outside their small home was harsh, especially for a girl without a father's protection. She tried her best to guide Sandra by telling her the importance of education as the key to a better life. "You must be strong and wise, my daughter," Nkechi often said to her, her voice soft yet firm. "Education will give you wings to fly beyond the streets. Be mindful of those you mingle with in school. Don't be found in the midst of bad company or friends. Align yourself with the best brains in class," Nkechi advises her daughter as she set out to go to her institution. Sandra recently secured an admission into the university to study medicine and surgery. Leaving her mother's roof for the first time brought about a lot of concern for Nkechi. She can only hope and pray that her daughter focuses on her study and not associate with bad company. Please subscribe to my channel at African Storytales by Evie. Like and comment and share with your loved ones. In other words, Sandra, like most teenagers, had other ideas. School was a chore, a place filled with endless lessons and strict teachers. Sandra has always craved for excitement, the kind she only heard about in whispers from her classmates. She has always envied the older girls who seemed so confident and free, and the lure of the unknown pulled at her, making her restless and curious about the world beyond the school walls. One afternoon, while Sandra was returning to her lodge from lectures, she met a girl named Sylvia. Sylvia was everything Sandra admired: bold, confident, and carefree. She was known for her rebellious nature and was often seen with a group of older boys who had no interest in lectures. They spent their days roaming around the city, seeking fun and excitement in places Sandra has never dared to visit, such as the club and hotels. Sylvia noticed Sandra's fascination, befriended her quickly. "Why do you waste your time with books?" Sylvia asked one day as they sat under the mango tree, watching the boys play football. She said to her, "There's so much more to life than those boring lectures we attend daily," Sylvia said with a deceitful smile on her face. Sandra hesitated, remembering her mother's words, but the excitement in Sylvia's voice was hard to resist. She began to skip lectures, spending more time with Sylvia and her friends. They introduced her to parties, late night outings, and other vices she had only heard about in passing. At first, it was thrilling, the freedom, the laughter, the sense of belonging. But soon, Sandra found herself in a situation that made her uncomfortable. Yet, the fear of losing her new friends kept her silent. When Sandra traveled home one weekend to see her mother, Nkechi noticed the change in Sandra's late night returns, the secretive phone calls, the flashy lifestyle she was living, knowing fully well the money she gives her cannot afford such things. This got her mother, Nkechi, disturbed. She confronted Sandra one morning as they sat in their living room. She said to her daughter, "My daughter, I have noticed a lot of changes in you lately. Tell me, how did you get the money to afford all these expensive phones, clothes that you wear these days? Why do you go out and come back so late at night? Who are these friends of yours that always come to take you out every evening?" she queried Sandra with so much rage in her voice. "Don't tell me all this advice I gave you fell on deaf ears. These friends will lead you astray, my child. Remember the dreams we had for you, the life we wanted to build," pleading with her to stay focused on her study. But rather, Sandra ignored all her mother's concerns. Blinded by the excitement of her new lifestyle, brushed off her mother's concern. "You won't understand, Mama," she would say, rolling her eyes. "I am just having fun. You worry too much, Mama." As months passed, Sandra's life drifted further out of control. One evening, after a particular wide party, Sandra woke up in a stranger's bed, all alone in a hotel room, with no memory of how she got there. Fears gripped her heart, but she pushed the thoughts away, burying it under layers of denial. After some weeks, Sandra began to notice changes in her body, changes that she could no longer ignore. As panic set in, she had no idea who the father was, and worst of it all, she knew this would destroy her mother's heart. When she finally gathered the courage to tell her mother, Nkechi, the older woman's world shattered. The shame, the disappointment, the heartbreak. Nkechi could barely breathe as Sandra tearfully confessed, "You have destroyed me, Sandra." Nkechi whispered, her voice trembling with sorrow. "Everything I have worked for, everything I have sacrificed is gone. How could you do this to me, to us? What have I not done for you to have a good life? I have given you all, and this is how you repay me. My God, Sandra has finished me," she wailed. Sandra could only weep, her heart with regrets. She had been so foolish, so blinded by the fun of a life that had only led her down a dark path. Nkechi, devastated by the scandal, became withdrawn. The vibrant, strong woman Sandra had always known faded away, replaced by someone weak and broken. The news of Sandra's pregnancy spread quickly throughout the neighborhood. Everyone in the neighborhood gossiped about Sandra and her mother, saying, "Look at the shameless girl. After all the sacrifice of her mother, she still lived a carefree life. I don't blame her. I blame her mother." for not bringing her up the right way. Another said, when Nkechi heard about the hurtful words said about her behind her back, it broke her the more, and the once respected family became the subject of mockery and ridicule. Nkechi, unable to bear the shame, fell ill. Her condition worsened rapidly, and within few months, she passed away, leaving Sandra completely alone in the world. Sandra wept uncontrollably, sad about the fact that her mother died in a heartbroken situation. She won't forgive herself about how the whole event unfolded. Now, an orphan with no one to turn to, Sandra was forced to drop out from school. She had no means to support herself and her unborn child. She was left with no option than to start hawking in the traffic. She sold items like water, fruits, snacks, and other things that could bring her a little money to feed herself and her unborn child. Each day was a struggle. The street of Arata was harsh and unforgiving to a young girl burdened with such a heavy responsibility. Sandra wandered the busy road, the noise of the city, a constant reminder of how far she had fallen. She would often sit by the roadside, her eyes vacant and wondering how she ended up like this. She was only 17, yet life had already stripped her of her innocence, her family, and her future. One rainy afternoon, as Sandra stood under a bridge selling oranges, she heard a familiar voice calling her name. Turning around, she saw a friend named Sherry, her old school friend. Sherry was one of the few girls who stayed away from the bad influence of the crowd back then in school, focusing on her study and keeping her distance from trouble. She had always been kind to Sandra. "Sandra, is that you?" Sherry asked, her eyes wide with surprise. "What happened to you? Where have you been? It's been a while. I'm so glad to see you." The kindness in Sherry's voice was too much for Sandra to bear, as the pain, the regret, the loneliness, everything she has been holding in came pouring out. She had contributed to the tragic loss of her mother and her struggles on the street. Sherry listened quietly, her heart aching for Sandra. When Sandra finished telling her story, Sherry took her hand and squeezed it gently. "You don't have to go through this alone, Sandra," she said softly. "I'm here for you." Sherry didn't just offer words. She offered Sandra a way out. She took Sandra to her home, where she lived with her parents. They welcomed Sandra with an open arm, providing her with a safe place to stay. Sherry's mother was a kind-hearted woman, helped Sandra find prenatal care, and guided her through the final months of her pregnancy. With Sherry's help, Sandra slowly began to rebuild her life. The roads were not easy, but she determined to make the most out of the second chance she has been given. After her baby was born, a beautiful little girl, she named her Nkechi in the honor of her late mother. Sandra found work as an apprentice in a tailoring shop. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a honest work, and it gave her a sense of purpose. Sherry continued to be a constant source of support, encouraging Sandra all the way along, and also advising her to finish her education. With Sherry's help, Sandra enrolled in an evening class, determined to get her life back on track. Though the path ahead was long and uncertain, Sandra faced it with new sense of strength and resilience. She knew the choices she made had consequences, but she also knew it wasn't too late to change her future. Sandra vowed to live a life her mother would have been proud of, to raise her daughter with the values her mother tried so hard to instill in her. Sandra diligently focused on her studies. At first, it was not easy for her, but with determination and focus, she was able to overcome the hurdles of life. She knew now the choices she made had consequences, but she also knew that it wasn't too late to change the future. Thank you for watching till the very end. Hope you enjoyed this story. Please share with me in the comment section what you learned from this story. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel at African Story Tales by Abby. Turn on your notification button to stay tuned for more interesting and mind-blowing story. Also like and share with family and friends. I remain your favorite storyteller, African Stories by Abby. Bye.